Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be the 5th episode of my Japanese gastronomy and language series, and today we're going to be talking about okonomiyaki on the cooking side, and on the language side we're going to be covering a whole array of things, like some important vocabulary, frequency verbs, and we're going to start getting into the world of verbs. And so this is going to really start building on our Japanese knowledge and give us the ability to start creating our own phrases and understanding a bit more of this beautiful language. So let's get to it.
Let's start by going over 10 words of essential vocabulary. The first one is hon, which is book. And if you notice, hon forms a part of the word Nihon, which means Japan. Because hon, the word hon means book, but it can also mean origin. And the word ni, well, the sound ni can mean the sun, or it can mean day and other things. But in this case, it means the origin of the sun. And so that's the word Nihon. But anyways, hon means book. Next up is ongaku, which means music, eiga, which means movies, and yakyu, which means baseball. Next up we have gakusei, which means student, isha, which means doctor, bengoshi, which means lawyer, and fuku, which means clothes. The last two vocabulary words for today are takai, which means expensive, and yasui, which means cheap. Now let's go on to learn some frequency words. Some of the most common frequency words in Japanese, which are going to be the ones that we're going to be learning today, are these four. Mainichi, which means every day, and if you break the word down, mai means every, all, and nichi means day, so every day. Yoku, which means often. Dokidoki, which means sometimes, or zenzen, which means never. Now, in order to start using some of the words we've learned today in proper phrases in Japanese, we should start learning the verbs. And so let's start by learning the easiest kind of verbs, which is the masu verb forms. The masu verb forms are the polite non-past verbs in Japanese. They can express both present and future depending on the context. Now, forming masu verbs is actually pretty simple. You see, in Japanese there are two main types of verb groups. The first one are the yu verbs, and these are verbs whose last sound of the stem, because in verbs there's the stem and then the ending. So in this case, the last sound of the stem would be a U sound. For example, kiku, which means to listen. Ku, the last sound is a U. Yomu, the last sound is also a U. So in these verbs, it's very easy to change from the dictionary form into the masu form. The only thing you have to do is replace the final U sound of the stem with an E sound. For in this case, it would be kiki. In this case, it would be yomi. And after that, just add the masu ending. So this would end up being kikimasu, and this would end up being yomimasu. So how do you think this verb, kao, to buy, would go from its dictionary form, which is kao, into its masu form? The last sound is a U, so that means it's a U verb, and that means we have to change that sound into a E sound, and add the masu. So it becomes kaimasu, to buy. On the other hand, we have the root verbs, which end in the root hiragana symbol, like miru and taberu, which means to watch and to eat. And for these verbs, it's even simpler to change them into their masu form. The only thing you have to do is drop this root sound and add in the masu. So this would become mimasu, and this would become tabemasu, because this root disappears. So it would be tabe, and you add in the mas, and it becomes tabemasu. And here, this root disappears, and it becomes mimasu. So it's really very simple. Apart from these verbs, there are also a few irregular verbs, which are important to learn because they're some of the more common verbs in Japanese, but there's only 2 or 3, so really you just have to memorize them, and that's all. These verbs in Japanese are pretty simple, honestly. Now that we know what masu verbs are, let's go over 5 of the ones that will help us the most to make phrases with the vocabulary we learned before. And these are kikimasu, to listen, yomimasu, to read, mimasu, to watch, kaimasu, to buy, and tabemasu, to eat. Notice that the U at the end of the mas isn't pronounced, just as with the des copula, where it wasn't pronounced either. The last thing we need to learn before being able to start constructing phrases with all of the stuff we've learned today is the o particle, which is made from the hiragana wo symbol, which, as we talked about in the video where we went over hiragana, is rarely pronounced o. This particle is essential to Japanese sentence structure, and what it basically does is it marks the direct object of verbs. So for example, in this phrase, I eat rice, gohan o tabemasu, what is the direct object of the verb to eat? The rice. So then, if in English it's I eat rice, in Japanese, first it's the direct object, gohan, o, which marks this direct object, and then the verb. So for example, if I were to say I eat vegetables, it would be yasai o tabemasu. Or if I were to say I drink water, it would be mizu o nomimasu. And now, with everything that we've learned in mind, like the frequency words, the vocabulary words in general, and the verb forms that we just learned, as well as the o particle, we're ready to make a whole new range of Japanese phrases. So let's begin. Watashi wa mainichi ongaku o kikimasu. What do you guys think this phrase means? Let's break it down word by word. Watashi, which means I. Wa, which is the subject, the subject marker, which means that watashi is the subject of this phrase. Mainichi, frequency word, which means every day. Ongaku, music. O, the direct object particle, kikimasu. So this means the direct object of the verb to listen, kikimasu, is ongaku. So, watashi wa mainichi ongaku o kikimasu. I listen to music every day. And it's important to notice that in Japanese, verbs always go at the end of the phrase. And the normal structure for sentences is subject, object, verb. So in this case, the subject is watashi, I, the object is ongaku, music, and the verb is kikimasu, which is to listen. Now, for the next sentence, we have yoku gohan o tabemasu. Yoku is a frequency word, which means often. Gohan is rice, as we already know. And o tabemasu, to eat, is the verb, and o, the direct object particle, refers to this verb tabemasu, and saying that rice is the direct object of the verb tabemasu. So that means I often eat rice. Now notice that the I isn't actually a part of the phrase. It doesn't show up. There's no watashi here. And this is because in Japanese, when it's clear from context, it's often that the subject gets dropped from the actual word, the actual phrase. So if it's obvious that I am talking or you are talking, there's no need to put in the watashi or the you. It just gets dropped. And finally, for the last phrase, we have tokidoki eiga o mimasu. Tokidoki, again, like yoku, is a frequency word, and there's no subject before it because the subject must be inferred by context. So tokidoki means sometimes. Eiga was movies, and o marks the direct object of the verb mimasu, which means to watch. So I sometimes watch movies. Here we have two more phrases. Sensen hon o yomimasu. Zenzen, which means never, frequency word. Hon, which means book. O, which is the direct object marker of this verb yomimasu, to read. So this phrase, what do you think this phrase will mean then? Zenzen hon o yomimasu. I never read books. Now, the last one we're going to be learning for today is takai fuku o kaimasu. Takai, if you recall, meant expensive. Fuku were clothes. O is the direct object marker, in this case of the verb kaimasu, which means to buy. So how do you think this would turn out? Takai fuku o kaimasu. I buy expensive clothes, or I will buy expensive clothes. Now, with that, we reach the end of our Japanese section of the video for today, and I really recommend you guys take all these new things we've learned and try to write out a few sentences yourselves with all of the things we've learned, and with that you'd get comfortable with making your own sentences in written Japanese, and you start to interiorize the sentence structure and a lot of important things for Japanese going forward. So I really recommend you guys do that, and now let's get on to the cooking part of this video.
Okonomiyaki means literally grilled as you like it. And this name does the dish quite a lot of justice, seeing as people in Japan tend to vary the ingredients that they put in it and the toppings quite a lot. And okonomiyaki came to be as a development of different primitive versions of savory pancakes that had more liquid batters or were just different, and these developed in the Edo period. But the common version the version that we now know of, and basically came to be after the Second World War, and it was basically as a result of the scarcity of food that happened in that era, and that led people to mix different ingredients that they had around the house, like cabbage or flour or random meats that they found, and they tried to put them all in one place to make a nutritional dish and make the most of what they had at the time. And that was basically how the modern version of okonomiyaki, which is a savory pancake with like a batter that you put in a pan and you fry it, and like these mix of different ingredients, that was how it came to be. And nowadays okonomiyaki is an absolute staple dish in Japan. It's extremely common and is one of the most popular comfort foods. It brings people together to eat it because it's like a very casual family dinner for the weekends or weekdays, and different friends and family gather around one table to make it and eat it. And there's also specific restaurants that are dedicated only to the making of okonomiyaki. And there are two main points in which okonomiyaki are more popular than the rest of Japan, which is in Hiroshima and Osaka, and they don't have their like way of making it that is very distinct one from another, and they all have they want to boast about them being like the true home of this dish. From one side, Osaka, which is the version that we'll be making today, has all the ingredients mixed, and it's the more common or widespread version around the world today. And on the other hand, Hiroshima, instead of mixing all the ingredients, has all the ingredients layered, and it also includes some yakisoba noodles, so it's quite different. And so yeah, it's a very popular dish, and it's enjoyed around the country as a street food, as a festival food, or just as casual dinner.
またね